The second module of digestion and nutrition focuses on the physiology of digestion, specifically the reflexes, enzymes, and hormones used to regulate it. The objective of this molecule is to discuss the various aspects of digestive physiology. This includes the reflexes, diseases, hormones, and deviations of homeostasis. In other words, what happens when something goes wrong with the digestive system. Hopefully you remember from A&P1 the basics of a reflex. Reflexes are automatic responses. They are not learned. Generally, they are comprised of a receptor, which receives a stimulus, a sensory neuron that carries that information to the CNS, and usually just the spinal cord, an integration center, the brain or spinal cord, and a motor neuron to carry the response back to an effector, which is always a muscle or a gland. There are many reflexes in the digestive system that you are born with. In other words, a baby can swallow, move things along in the digestive system via peristalsis, vomit, and defecate without any problem, and they certainly don't have to be taught to do any of these things. Again, all of these are reflexes in the digestive system. Look at this diagram and notice that you have a receptor, a sensory neuron, an integration center, a motor neuron, and an effector. The swallowing reflex is shown here. The uvula moves up so the food doesn't go up the nose, and the epiglottis moves down or covers the trachea so you don't put food into the respiratory system. It is triggered by the presence of food in the back of the mouth. As soon as food is swallowed, the esophagus is stimulated to move it downward via peristalsis. Again, this is automatic, not learned, and not under voluntary control. Although later you can purposely hold food in your mouth without swallowing, the swallowing reflex is a reflex, and so is movement down into the stomach by the esophagus. Food must be mixed and moved along. This occurs along the entire alimentary canal from mouth to anus. Mixing is quite rhythmic. Stomach, for example, is continuously squeezing to mix the food with the gastric juice. Peristalsis moves food along from mouth to anus in a wave-like motion. It moves about 1 centimeter per second in the esophagus, but is much slower in the colon. Otherwise, we would have to poop as often as we ate. Check out the quick animation of peristalsis here by clicking on the link. Again, movement and mixing uses smooth muscles, which are not voluntary, uses segmentation to squeeze things, and peristalsis, the wave-like motion, to move things along. Mixing makes sure all the surface of the fecal matter is exposed to the walls of the colon so that water and electrolytes can be absorbed. So as it moves around, the colon absorbs the water and the vitamins and minerals. Peristalsis is much slower here, only 2 to 3 times per day, which is called mass movements. This moves material closer to the rectum. The defecation reflex is initiated by the person. During this, you will hold your breath slightly and contract the abdominal wall muscles to increase pressure and force feces into the rectum. This in turn stimulates peristaltic waves in the descending colon and relaxes the anal sphincter muscles. Because of holding your breath, there is a transient rise in blood pressure. One of the #1 causes of heart attacks in older folks is defecation, especially since older folks are more likely to be constipated and therefore strain even more during defecation. Feces are approximately 75% water, the rest being non-digested or unabsorbed materials, electrolytes, mucus, and bacteria. About 30% of the dry weight is dead bacteria. Color is due to biopigments. Odor is due to various chemicals including phenols, hydrogen sulfide, indoles, skatols, and ammonia. The amount of fecal matter depends on what and how much you eat. Remember enzymes? This is from Goal 2 in A&P1. You should know what enzymes are and what they do, because without enzymes, digestion of food, the macromolecules into the building blocks, could not happen. Remember, we eat macromolecules, but our cells can only absorb the building blocks. So without enzymes, the food would not be digested, and nutrients, therefore, could not be absorbed. Bacteria in the large intestine might enjoy getting all that food, but if they do get it, in other words, if we don't absorb those nutrients and they get to the large intestine, The microbes in the large intestine, the colon, have a party, and we do not enjoy that result because it causes gas, pain, and bloating for us. Enzymes speed up the rate of reaction. Okay, if you're still struggling to remember some of this stuff, this again is a review of the stuff that you learned in A&P1. Enzymes are like ovens. They convert cookie dough into cookies without they themselves changing. The oven will keep doing this as long as you supply the cookie dough and keep the conditions normal. The oven has to stay plugged in, for example, or the gas has to be hooked up. In our cells, proper temperature and pH and cofactors, which are generally vitamins and minerals, need to be there in order for an enzyme to work properly. Most enzymes are proteins and convert substrates into products. They fold up into a particular shape, which means they only fit one particular substrate. Most enzymes convert one substrate to one particular product or do the reverse reaction. The figure shows the purple-colored enzyme. Okay, in the picture here, the purple-colored blob is the enzyme, and it is converting the red blob, or the substrate, into the products, which are the blue and green blobs. This would be a catabolic enzyme because the products are smaller than the substrate. In other words, something was broken down. Check out this video if you want some quick review about the enzymes. So just hit play if you want to stop and look at this right now. When we eat food made up of fats, carbs, and proteins, digestive enzymes along the digestive system are used to break those macromolecules down into the building blocks. Once they are building blocks, these can be absorbed and become useful to us. Cells can absorb glucose, but they cannot absorb carbs. Look at the enzymes used in each of these pathways. Do you know where they are active? What part of the digestive system they're secreted from? Hopefully you got that from the first module. Okay. Besides the enzymes listed here, bile, stomach acid, and later bicarbonate are also very important for good digestion. Enzyme function may depend on that. So for fat digestion, for example, you may also need bile to help break up the fats so the lipases can work. Stomach acid helps unfold proteins, make it easier for pepsin and trypsin and peptidases to work. Here are some examples of enzymes in the digestive system. You should be able to name the substrate and product for the digestive enzyme. For example, the substrate for amylase is starch, the product is glucose. Butter is the substrate for what enzyme? Hopefully you remember that those are lipases that break down fat into fatty acids. Okay. Gastric juice is produced all the time, which you don't necessarily need to be happening if food isn't there. The parasympathetic nervous system is the inducer of digestion, and it would increase the secretion of gastric juice if you smell, think, or start to eat food. It also increases mixing and peristalsis. Putting food in your mouth and swallowing will increase gastric juice as well. Besides the parasympathetic nervous system, there are also several hormones that play a role in digestion. The three that you should focus on include gastrin, secretin, and cholecystokinin. Gastrin is released from the stomach when the stomach is stretched, and it causes a release of more HCl, or stomach acid. Secretin is released from the duodenum when acidic food enters or chyme enters that, and it causes the release of pancreatic secretions. Remember, pancreatic secretions include bicarbonate, so more acidic chyme, you get more secretin, which results in more bicarbonate. CCK, also released from the duodenum when fatty chyme enters it, causes the release of bile. Remember, you need bile to help digest fat, so that's a good way to get more of it. CCK also slows gastric activity and goes to your brain and reduces hunger. This figure from the Visual A&P textbook again shows the actions of gastrin, secretin, and CCK. Don't worry about the other ones so much here. They're more inhibitor hormones, so you should know gastrin, secretin, and CCK. It is difficult to pinpoint the exact length of the digestive system as well as the time food spends there. It depends a lot on the person, what you eat, and how much you eat at a given meal. I found this table that gives some estimates, but even that website stated they are literally just estimates. But in about 40 hours, most of the food that you have put in your mouth has been eliminated. Some of the diseases you should know about. Hepatitis is caused by a virus. Hepatitis B in particular is quite deadly. It can destroy liver cells and kill you if it leads to liver cancer. Cirrhosis is a liver problem when the liver cells degenerate but the connective tissue overgrows, particularly the fat tissue. Usually it is due to long-term consumption of alcohol. Diverticulitis or diverticulosis is inflammation of the lining of the colon, causing pouches to protrude, and food can get caught in there, and that can be dangerous. Heartburn or acid reflux, or sometimes called GERD, is basically acid going back up into the esophagus because the cardiac or esophageal sphincter is loose or opens too often, and acid flows back up and it burns the esophagus. Enteritis, inflammation of the intestine, is kind of a general term. Colitis is inflammation of the colon, and pancreatitis is inflammation of the pancreas. All of these can be caused by a variety of things, but generally impedes digestion and can make you quite sick. Gallstones is when the bile gets too concentrated and crystallizes. If they stayed in the gallbladder, they'd be fine, but getting stuck in the cystic duct, the bile duct, or the pancreatic duct can cause big problems for the patient. And jaundice is due to a buildup of bilirubin in the blood and can make you kind of yellowish. Generally means your kidney's not functioning very well. Please take advantage of the various resources if you need more information about the regulation of digestion.